Good morning, good evening in Tokyo.
Good morning, good evening. It's both of them somewhere, right?
Yes, yes, yes. I'm BL Ochman, and I have the extreme pleasure of being here today with Katsura Sunshine, who is one of the astoundingly funny and accomplished practitioners of Rakugo. And I saw you in New York on Broadway back in the fall. I think it was the fall. Who knows what seasons are anymore?
Yeah.
And just laughed my head off. And I'm still laughing about some of the stories that you told on that day. So now I want to congratulate you on your nomination for Off-Broadway Alliance as Most Unique Off-Broadway Performance. That's pretty wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it's wonderful, wonderful news during kind of darker times. It was unexpected, and so I'm so happy to be selected. Well, who would have thought?
It's well deserved in my opinion. So
Thank you so much.
please explain Rakugo. What
Sure, Rakugo is a
exactly?
four.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Rakugo is a 400-year tradition of comic storytelling in Japan. The stories have been passed down from master to apprentice through the generations up until the present day. And it's very simple, very minimalistic. The storyteller wears a kimono, kneels on a cushion, and using only two very simple props, which are the hand towel and the fan for props, will weave a story that has been passed down through the generations. But before one gets into the story proper, there's a kind of a monologue, a kind of a warm-up monologue at the beginning, which is a lot like stand-up comedy. And that's where you're trying to get to know the audience. And a lot of times you're deciding which story to do based on their reaction to the monologue and what you could tell about the audience from the stage and the interaction and that kind of thing.
So how did you come as a Canadian to become a Rakugo master? How'd you do that? And how did you decide that you were going to do that? I know you were successful in theater in Toronto before that.
That's a crazy story. I was writing musicals in my youth out of university. I was a playwright and a composer, writing musical comedy. And my main area of study and the musicals that I'd produced professionally were all based on 2,500-year-old Greek comedies by Aristophanes.
So
And
you're a
I had one show.
historian.
Sorry?
You're a historian.
Yeah, I don't know much of a historian, but I did study Greek and Latin in university. And part of it, we used to put on shows in the classics department every year for high school children. It's called High School Classics Day. And then some of the professors would give lectures, and then we, the students, would put on a show. And because the Greek and Roman comedies had a lot of swearing on it and a lot of flatulence in them and a lot of very ribald humor, it just went great with the high school kids. But this is a way to kind of promote classics because, you know, it's not the most popular area for people to get into. So we were just trying to get as many students as possible to join the classics department. So it was a big promotional effort at first, but a bunch of us took it really seriously. And then one of my friends who was in the show, her father came to see one of the musicals and said, "You got to do this professionally. So I'll bankroll your first production." So it was a production of Aristophanes' Clouds, which is all about Socrates and sophistry and all that, set to the music of Gilbert and Sullivan and opera and operetta. And it became a hit in Toronto, ran for 15 months,
Oh,
and then
that's
toured Canada.
fabulous. That's
Crazy.
really fabulous. So then how did that lead to Rakugo?
So what the heck does all this have to do with Japan? You might
Right,
ask.
exactly.
Very good question. A lot of people do ask that. And as a matter of fact, it's directly related. During my research into Aristophanes and the Greeks, one scholar wrote this scholarly article about how coincidentally the Greek comedies and tragedies, things by like Euripides and Aeschylus and Sophocles, and then Aristophanes, which I was studying, and Japanese no and kabuki had all these coincidental similarities. Now, the time period is completely different. The Greek stuff is 2,500 years ago plus. The Japanese theater that I'm talking about, No and Kabuki, are more like 400 or 500 years old. So there's completely different centuries. There's no chance that they had any kind of cultural exchange or anything like that at the time. And yet, this is 20 years ago, but things like the use of masks, things like the musical instruments that they happen to use, things like the levels of declamation, like speaking, chanting, singing, different things that seem to indicate that, to this scholar, that theater was in some ways universal.
So you went to Japan.
Well, for me, I thought like Kabuki, the Greek stuff was superseded or subverted or whatever, buried by the Romans after that. And then the only thing we know about Greek theater is what we get from the pots and a couple of scripts that are left over. And you can't really, it's all speculation on what it actually looked like in a lot of ways. But the Japanese stuff that I'm talking about, like Kabuki, has been performed in a continuum since its inception 400 years ago. So the Kabuki you see today is basically it's pretty good representation of what it was a couple hundred years ago. So I thought, I got to see it. And so I made my way over to Japan thinking I'd stay for a few weeks. And 21 years later, I'm still in Japan.
So I read on your website that you went to the first Kabuki club and you heard Rakugo storytellers. And then what?
Well, as a matter of fact, I did see Kabuki and I did see No, and I just fell in love with Japan, stayed here and learned Japanese and kept doing my playwriting. But in my 5th year here, when I could speak some Japanese already, the owner of a yakitori shop was the chicken skewers.
Uh-huh.
I love yakitori. Like there's a little shop, you get to know everybody. It's basically 10 people at the counter, and that's the whole restaurant. But in his upstairs, he had a tatami room, and he did these Rakugo performances. And the owner of the restaurant said, if you like Japanese culture, Rakugo is also fun. And this guy was a kind of amateur Rakugo producer, but he hired professional storytellers once every couple of months to do a show in his restaurant.
In
and
Japanese?
So I thought, I got nothing to do. Like, talk about decisions that change your life. You got to be really careful of decisions you take lightly in your life, don't you? I mean, it's like, I got nothing better to do. And he says it's going to be good. And I went, sat down on the tatami with maybe 30 other audience members packed in there. And this storyteller came out in a kimono and just started telling these jokes like a stand-up comedian. Hilarious. Then acted out a story, turns his head to the left, plays one character, turns his head to the right, plays another character, and every story ends in a punchline. And then they go through the whole thing. After you've seen 4 stories, you realize, okay, this is a set. He's got the introduction, the kind of stand-up comedy bit, the story proper, and the punchline. And it was love at first sight. I thought, this is what I was born to do. Gotta do it.
So how on earth did you convince your mentor to take you on? And how long was that apprenticeship?
Yeah, it wasn't easy. It took about 8 months for him to finally agree to take me on, because at the time there were no foreigners, no Westerners. That's about 800 professional storytellers present, and I guess 12 years ago when I was asking him, maybe around the same and a little bit less. So it's kind of unprecedented. 100 years ago, there was an Australian, so I cannot claim to be the first ever, but the first in a long time. Anyway,
100 years ago. Wow.
100 years ago. So it's different times. Yeah, my master has been a popular television star as well as a storyteller for 50 years. And he's someone that said he writes his own stories. He's written 300 of his own original Rakugo stories to go on top of the canon of traditional stories that we all take from. So he is a kind of a pioneer and a bit of a renegade, as well as a huge star, and always someone looking for ways to broaden the appeal of Rakugo. So I think he saw in me, after 8 months of me kind of just hanging out at his workplace, at his TV shows, and at his performances, he saw I had to convince him I was a bit dedicated and ready to go through the apprenticeship, and then he took me on. And the reason for that is that it's not an easy apprenticeship, and it's not for older people. I was 38 at the time. Older. I'm saying older now.
Yeah.
I'm 50 now. But no, it's really for the original apprenticeship is something you would do in place of high school a long time ago, right? I mean, you wouldn't go
What
to
did you
school.
do? What was the apprenticeship?
It's the whole. It's what you would think of as a traditional apprenticeship. It was, 3 years, no days off. Go to the master's house when he calls you, but basically at 8 a.m. or 7 a.m. and do the laundry, do the cleaning, fold kimonos, menial chores, carry bags, and help out at his shows. And basically with the master every waking hour for 3 years.
And during that time, you absorbed the storytelling, or
You
were
do. There's a
there
saying in
lessons?
Japanese called ge o nusumu, which means steal the art. So he's not spending so much time teaching you per se. You watch and you learn. However, when you've memorized a story, first at the very beginning, you ask him permission. You say, "Can I memorize this story? I'm interested in that story," or you do the stories that maybe he tells you. Once you've memorized a story, you can say, "Master, I've memorized this story," and at some point in the next few days, he'll say, "Okay, just try it out," and then you'll recite it in front of him, and that's when he gives you direct coaching or teaching on how to perform that story. And if it's once you get it to a good enough point, he says, "All right, you can do that one." Once he gives you permission, that's your story for life, and then you get to. It's
Oh,
part of your what would you call it?
library.
Repertoire. It's part of your
Yeah.
library. Yes.
So, in addition, you add your own stories to it?
Can do that. Some people write their own stories. Now, the first part, the kind of stand-up comedy warm-up part, is all your own material, and that's a lot of self-deprecating humor. You introduce yourself to the audience, self-deprecating humor, and anecdotal humor, things from your life, observational humor. If I'm in the Osaka tradition, but not all the storytellers were born in Osaka. So if they're born in a different part of the country, they'll talk about their experiences coming to Osaka, because Osaka is a really crazy, funny town where normal people in the street, especially elderly ladies, are all comedians. That's they're famous. The elderly ladies in Osaka are famous for being funnier than the comedians, which makes it a great training ground for comedians, because you have to be funnier than the elderly ladies, which is a high bar to cross, because everybody has just got this Osaka rhythm of talking that's just hilarious.
That's so
So
funny.
yeah, so my experiences as a Canadian, a Slovenian Canadian trying to learn Japanese, the craziness of Japanese grammar and the way the different levels of language to address people depending on their relative hierarchy compared to you and that kind of thing, 47 different ways to say thank you and all kinds of that kind of stuff. All this material that I wrote that I'm using on Broadway now, which sound like a lot of, like this Canadian went to Japan and here's his anecdotes. All of my material in that respect was written in Japanese. I wrote it in Japanese in order to make Japanese people laugh. So
Well,
it started out
I'm
as Japanese
astounded.
comedy, even though I'm doing it in English and in New York.
I'm astounded at your prowess in Japanese, because I, for 18 years, had a Japanese client who happened to be headquartered in Osaka,
Right
and
now, good.
they said that it would take 3 years for you to be at the level of a 3-year-old in Japanese, and that you had to give it like so many years in order to speak passably. And you're totally fluent, so obviously you have a gift, and you must have worked very hard.
Yeah, but I can't read and write still. I mean, it's crazy to say that, but I'm almost illiterate in Japanese. You'd be surprised. So my Japanese is good in that I know the traditional area of Rakugo comic storytelling, that language, specific language. And I think my polite Japanese is good with the levels, because you have to do that when you're declaiming on stage. You have to be in vis-a-vis your audience. You have to speak in the most polite forms in your introduction, that kind of thing. So my Japanese is good in that way, and I can make people laugh. But I totally agree with that assessment. Japanese is not. It's quite the first little while. It's quite an uphill battle for English speakers. The Chinese people, even though Chinese language and Japanese language are not related at all, except the fact that Japanese people took Chinese characters and applied them artificially to their own language. So they write in a similar way. But the grammatical structures, vocabulary, they're completely unrelated languages. But Chinese people pick up Japanese so quick, it just drives me crazy.
Well, that is pretty remarkable. And I
Yeah,
think you speak a little Chinese too, right?
I'm starting to learn. I'm starting to learn Chinese. What happened was I had this video. This is the 47 different ways to say thank you. It's a video of one
Tell
of my
us some of
routines.
them. Tell us some of them.
Sure, yeah, it's crazy. You know, we say thank you or thank you very much. Or if the Queen Elizabeth walked in the room, it would be thank you, Your Majesty. It's all based on thank you. Thank you is not going to offend anyone. But in Japan, I got this dictionary from my master, and I looked up. It lists up every Japanese word or phrase from the very most polite to the almost rude and everything in between. And so for expressions of gratitude, it would be like arigato. And a little bit more polite now would be domo arigato. And a little more polite now, you'd say arigato gozaimasu. And then a little more polite now, you domo arigato gozaimasu. And I realized something very key about the Japanese language, about Japanese culture, Japanese spirit. The longer it gets, the more polite you are being. If you remember that, you'll be fine. So when these get towards the top of the list, these get a lot longer and harder to translate into English directly, right? Kore wa gotene ni domo. I must thank you for the great kindness you have done unto me, right? It's long, right? Or kokoro no soko kara kansha shite orimasu. I must thank you from the very bottom of my beating heart. Long.
No, that's great.
Or kono go on wa issho wasuremasen. I can never unburden myself of the debt of gratitude that I owe to you.
Oh, I love that one. I really love that one.
But listen, look at this. The very most polite way to express gratitude, I still don't understand what this one means. Nanto kansha moshiagete yoi yara kotoba mo gozaimasen. In order for me to express gratitude that I feel towards you, there are no words.
Well, there you go. So you said on Facebook the other night that you can hardly wait to get back to Broadway. We got some news last night that New York City is on quarantine until the middle of June. And I have begun to wonder, when are we going to theaters? What is, so I wonder how you're translating to being online and what sort of plans you have if this goes on for a longer time.
Yes, which I suspect it will. You're talking about, what did you say, June?
June 16th.
June 16th is quarantine, but Broadway announced that it's closed until at least Labor Day, which is in September, which everybody, I think, in the Broadway world was expecting that. That's not even, a lot of people make the mistake like, oh, Broadway's going to be opening in September. No, that's not what it means. It means they'll be closed until at least September 6th or whatever it is. I'm dying inside. I'm dying to get back on stage. Our run has gone for 6 months and it was great. And I want to continue it. And the theater is glad to have us. They extended our run up until like the 1 year mark, which is to September, which obviously we won't be able to right now, but we're welcome back apparently. And so I'm very grateful to New World Stages for holding our place for us like that.
What's this?
But on the other hand, I don't want to go back too quickly because you don't want to be starting where people are not yet comfortable being in a room in close quarters and that kind of thing, and then nobody comes to the theater or maybe someone gets sick. So I think the decision is the right decision. The inside of me is dying to be on stage, but I don't want to rush that part of it because there's so much to be done before we get back anyway. I want to hit the road running when we get back.
So between now and September, what will you be doing? I know you're on YouTube every Saturday night starting last week, which was wonderful, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, but as soon as my show ended because of the COVID-19, as soon as the Broadway shows closed, I have been doing a show every Thursday and Saturday night at 8 p.m. in place of the shows that I would have had on Broadway. I hadn't done Rakugo up until last week. But I've been doing my talk show live, and plus I'm doing a lot of videos right now, Rakugo videos and things about Japan and Rakugo and that kind of thing. The reason I didn't do Rakugo per se was because once I got back to Tokyo, I just had portable Wi-Fi, which kept funking out. Yeah. I didn't want my show just disappearing from the airwaves in the middle of a story. So I just said, look, wait until I get the proper Wi-Fi. wired to my studio here, and we'll do some proper stories. So I kept my promise. And every Saturday night, I'll be doing a new story, a little bit of a shorter version of a traditional story with the introduction and some jokes and that kind of thing. And then a little bit of a drinking party with the audience, a
That was so
virtual
much fun.
Zoom drinking party after, where people throw in their comments, and we have a little bit of a celebration after they give the impressions of the show. So, you know, what I have to say is, you know, you could look at it as I can't perform on stage right now on Broadway, so the compromise is doing it on the video screen. But I think that you want to look beyond that. You want to be able to do things that you can't do on Broadway. There's so many things you can do with this little screen and on
That's
YouTube.
so true. Yeah.
To make it so much fun in its own way. So like, let's reinvent the art form is what I think. So even and I haven't been able to do last week's story yet, but perhaps by the time when is this airing, by the way?
As soon as I get done editing it, hopefully be with the weekend.
So we'll be on a race, because the story I did live last week, I'm going to re-record it and then edit the heck out of it.
It
So
was
when
such
I'm
a
looking
great
left, I'm looking left.
story.
When I'm looking right, I'm looking right, and there's going to be subtitles and music in the background and sound effects, and it's going to be like the YouTube version of Rakugo. I did a short story you can find on my YouTube called The 4 Habits, which is a 3-minute story, but it happened to be a story about 4 men who have habits touching their face.
I
in
saw
funny
that,
ways.
yes.
And they have a contest. Each time you do your funny habit, you have to pay 1,000 yen. And I just put it up there because just by coincidence, now we're not supposed to be touching our faces, and it was kind of thematic. But I did this. I edited the heck out of it because there was some contest that that they were having. I think it was the UN or the WHO was having things where you apply with your art form. It had to be under 3 minutes, and this story is 10 minutes, so I had to get it down to 3 minutes. But then when I edited the life out of this story and put titles and put
Music
to it, it just became it took on a life of its own. I thought, this is a real, legitimately funny YouTube video as a YouTube thing, not a YouTube version of a stage art form, but something on its own.
paid for it.
Yeah, so I think, well, why not just do that? Because I think that's the way to take advantage. I certainly can't put titles and music and sound effects and that kind of editing onto a live stage show. So that's somewhere where you can really differentiate the art form, make it fun, and hopefully get some people interested in Rakugo that might not have discovered it before. And
So you're also a little geeky, right? Because you're doing your editing and you're doing your broadcasting.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's nuts. I love it. I'm obsessed with my computer. I think I'm going to go blind by the end of this.
Me too.
Which is kind of appropriate because the story I did last week was about the eye doctor, and some of the guys' eyes don't work, right? So the last week I've been working on my homepage,
Which is beautiful.
Thank you so much. But the great thing is, and even this studio, like I set this up in the last 2 months. You know, I've got soundproof curtains here. I've got proper lighting. I've got lighting in the back the way you're supposed to. I bought a really good camera. I've got, the only thing, my miking is not the best yet. I'm trying to get it. I got good equipment, but I don't know how to use it properly yet. The incredible thing is, YouTube is better than any university these days. Like, they teach you anything on YouTube.
That's true. There's nothing you can't find there.
There's nothing you can't learn. And there's great, like, so many people do videos like, okay, if you've got a budget of $500, here's how to set up your YouTube studio. Now, if you double that to $1,000, here's the equipment you can get. And they take it to any budget you have. They take it to any degree of knowledge. Like, look, you don't try to go to be a television show if you're just starting, because you can buy all the stuff and you won't understand it. Here's how to do it simple. But it's so effective. Yeah, so I feel it's so much fun. You get obsessed.
It's also generous. It is so remarkably generous of the people who share this information. But I will put all of your links to all of your platforms in the show notes.
Thank you so much.
And so we can make sure everybody knows those, because you seem to have a lot of YouTube channels. You have Japanese.
Chance. And this goes to a question you asked me, actually, why Chinese?
Yeah.
I started to explain it. What it's that little bit I just did on the 47 ways to say thank you. A Chinese person, unbeknownst to me, took that from YouTube a couple of years ago and put it on Weibo, which is the Chinese version of, I think, Twitter and YouTube put together. A lot of videos on it. And put Chinese titles. So it's me doing Japanese storytelling in English with Chinese titles. And it got 8 million views on Weibo,
Wow.
27,000 comments.
How fabulous.
I'm not sure what they were saying per se, but it was 27,000
They could have
comments,
been
right?
saying anything.
So leading up to our long run on Broadway, the open-ended run on Broadway that started last September, a couple of years ago, I just did 3 weeks, a kind of preview run, 3 weeks at the Soho Playhouse in Soho in Manhattan. 2 years ago, 2017. And I always see the audience out after the show. I'm not sure if I was able to in the show you came to, but I
No.
usually see the audience out after the show, take pictures and that kind of thing, right? Say thank you for coming. It's traditionally Rakugo way to do it.
Well,
All these people want to say arigato gozaimashita in Japanese, right? All these people saying I'm not Japanese, I'm Chinese, right? And after 5 or 6 times, like, oh, there's quite a few Chinese people coming to my show. I wonder why. But after like 25 people,
oh, you
I
didn't
thought, like,
know.
what's going on here, right? And so there's one Chinese person. I'm not Japanese. I'm Chinese. I enjoyed your show. It's like, okay, is Rakugo popular in China? And the guy looked me in the eyes and said, no, you're popular in China. I said, me? I've never been to China. What are you talking about? And he sent me this Weibo link, and it just floored me. So I thought, you know what? If I'm doing this stuff in English, and all these Chinese people are looking at it and liking it, and obviously they're probably fans of Japanese culture, because here's the thing. In the news, all you get is the politics of countries, right? And Chinese and Japanese, politically, they don't get along so well because of historical reasons, that kind of thing. But in general, population, normal people, so many of my Japanese friends love Chinese culture. Vice versa, Chinese people I meet love Japan. So many fans of Japanese pop culture and different traditional culture in China. Huge market. It's like, wow, it's incredible. So if I do this in Chinese,
Oh,
this is
wow.
going to be,
There's another
that's going to be
language
crazy, right?
to learn. I mean, the alphabet is what, like thousands of characters, or
I'm giving up on the alphabet of any of these languages as long as I can learn to talk it.
so on YouTube, you have 3 shows that you do every week. You do your talk show, and you do a
Yeah,
Japanese show, and
more than that, there's 2 talk shows live in English on the English channel, 2 talk shows live in Japanese, and then I'm doing videos. So it should be, by the time we get to the proper pace, there'll be 2 edited videos a week in Japanese, 2 in English, and 2 in Chinese. Here's the thing about Chinese. Usually you'd think of you just pay a teacher and then they teach you is a normal way. But I thought, if you've got crowdfunding these days, I'm going to try crowd learning. So I Google, get a joke, a Japanese traditional Rakugo joke. And I started with the one that I probably did it when you came because I use it as an introduction. This is a very short Rakugo story. It's 2 ladies gossiping in front of their house in old Edo, Japan. Did you hear? Mrs. Tanaka down the street fell down flat on her face, and her face became completely disfigured. Oh, really? That's too bad. Yes, but the doctor is amazing. He managed to put her face right back to the way it was before. Oh, really? That's too bad. That's a ridiculous joke. That's just a traditional Japanese joke. I Googled the Chinese and tried to figure out what might be the best way. You don't know because Google Translate, it's pretty good now.
it's
But
better
still,
than it used to be.
it doesn't take into account the niceties of culture, that kind of thing. But still, you can get it's artificial intelligence, right? It's getting better and better all the time.
And
So
they'll
it is
know
kind of
you're
astounding.
trying.
Here we go. I Google it, and then I take the pronunciation from Google, which was Chinese. It's so important to get the tones right. Who knows? I just do it. I did that joke, and I said, and then I put a sign up at the end of that video, which is like 40 seconds long. It's basically that. That's all. And it says, please, Chinese people out there, please help me with my Chinese. If you have some time, tell me if you have a better way of saying these things, and I'll do a better version of this video. And then, especially on Weibo, tens of comments rewriting my script saying this is more natural and this joke doesn't fly as well in Chinese, so you might want to twist it this way, and this piece of information might be a little bit more important than this piece of information. So kind of everyone.
Wow.
Put it together, and then I have a friend in Taiwan who kind of gave me a little bit more proper pronunciation, practiced it, did the video again a week later, and then boom, there's so much better. Incredible progress. So now I have 30 seconds of material for my Chinese show. And it's just going to go week by week until I have an hour show.
That is fabulous, though.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
So we need you on Netflix. What are the plans for that?
We were supposed to be in the most gorgeous theater I've ever performed in. It's the Winter Garden Theater in Toronto, a gorgeous 1,000 seat theater. I had it booked for Mother's Day just a few days ago. And we were gonna take 3-4 versions of the show. And then yeah, with whatever, 8 cameras, everything, the whole thing, like your typical stand-up comedy special. And just, do it up like that. And then, but it'd be Rakugo. And then we're going to take it to Netflix. So when I say we're going to record a Netflix special, I don't want to give the impression that Netflix had any clue that we were going to do that. They don't know they need us yet. But
well, that's how everything gets to them, really. I mean, they do a certain amount of production, but, oh, well, that's great news. I can't wait to see that.
Oh, it's going to be great. Yeah, it's going to be so much fun.
I want to ask you, will you tell us a story?
Sure. So I'll do a little bit of a prelude and then a very, very famous story. And it's okay, but it'll be about 3 minutes long. Is that all right? Is that
perfect?
Always have to ask the time. Like we're always.
It's perfect.
We're programmed to need to know exactly how. Like if we have a 10-minute bit in our master's show and we go 11 minutes, well, you don't hear the end of that for a long time. So it's the body clock. The trauma of apprenticeship has made myself obsessed with minutes and seconds. So 3 minutes, okay?
Perfect.
So one of the things when I went to Japan for the first time that surprised me is that in front of the train stations, wherever you go, there are people handing out tissues. And at first I thought these were free little tissue packets, free samples from the tissue companies. But after a month of this, 2 months of this, thinking, this is ridiculous. The tissue companies are going to get out of business if they're giving out their tissues for free. Who's going to buy them? And then I realized my Japanese friend said, no, this is advertising. It's not tissues. There's a little advertising card inside the tissue packet. And this is actually genius in Japanese advertising because the thinking is this. If, like we do to advertise our shows in Times Square for Broadway, off-Broadway, you give someone a pamphlet or a leaflet, they don't need it. 99% of the time, they throw it away. But if you give people a packet of tissues, which they can always use, they put it into their pocket, and then they take out the tissues to use them. They're looking at this little advertising card again and again. And there's a special word that accompanies the handing of the tissue. It's ikaga desu ka? And that means, why don't you try my something, something, whatever I'm advertising. So if I'm advertising the sushi shop, it'd be sushi ikaga desu ka? And if I'm advertising the yakitori shop, the yakitori skew, yakitori ikaga desu ka? If it's glasses, it'd be megane ikaga desu ka? If it's contact lenses, it'd be kontakuto lensu ikaga desu ka? Hand you the tissues, right? This is literally 7 months ago. I left Shinjuku Station in Tokyo. Young lady doing her part-time job, handing out tissues, looked me in the eyes and said, English conversation school, ikaga desu ka? Sometimes people make me say things to make me lose confidence in my English. And that leads me to the traditional story I'd like to tell you, because I get asked to perform in English, sometimes even in Japan, like at schools and universities especially. And I was performing this particular traditional, very famous Japanese story at the university in Hokkaido. This is a couple of years ago, so I hope you enjoy it. Once upon a time, there was a little boy with a very long name. His name was Jugemu Goko no Surikire Kai Jarisi. Sunyomatsu Furaimatsu Kuneru Tokoro ni Sumu Tokoro Yaburako Jiburako Jipaipo Paipo. Paipo no Shuringa no Gurindai Gurira no Pompoko Pino Pompoko Nano Chokyume no Chosuke. It was a very long name. One day, his neighbor, a little boy named Kin-chan, a relatively shorter name, came to pick him up for school. And Kin-chan said, Jugemu, Goko no Surikire, Kaidani, Ana, Hinyomatsu, Furaimatsu, Kuneru Tokoro ni Sumu Tokoro, Yaburako, Jiburako, Jipaipo, Paipo no Shuringa no Gurida no Pompoko Pino, Pompoko Nano, Chokyume no Chosuke kon. Let's go to school. And then Jugemu's mother came out and said, Kin-chan, you're so nice. But our Jugemu Goko no Surikire Kaijai Sinyo, Sunyomatsu Furaimatsu, Kuneru Tokoro ni Sumu Tokoro, Yaburako, Jiburako, Jipaipo, Paipo no Shuringa no Gurida no Pompoko Pino, Pompoko Nano, Chokyume no Chosuke. He's still sleeping. Wait here. I'll wake him up. Hey, Hey, jigga jigga go go city guy jadi sing 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 mas mas kun to to ya ber ko pipe on the shooting the good the pop pop choke you man wake up King-chan is here to pick you up. I'm sorry King-chan, please wait here. Jigga jigga go go city guy jadi sing mas kun to king kong kang kong King Kong 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 man, his name was so long. School for today is already finished. So just to tie up the story, I did this story for the university students in Hokkaido a couple years ago, and I got these comments from the students in the audience in the survey of how they enjoyed the show. Sunshine-san speaks very good English. I was surprised. Sunshine-san's English sounds almost as good as a native speaker. Almost.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much for the story.
Thank you very much. Not at all. My pleasure.
Thank you for your time today. This has been the biggest fun. And I will let everybody know where to find you online. And I will be there Saturday night listening at 8 o'clock. And this has just been great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. One of my master's original stories I'm going to be doing this time. So you'll enjoy that one as well.
Oh, can't wait. All
Great.
right.
Thank you so much for bringing me on. Please keep in touch.